The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2 left Sauron with all the ingredients he will likely need for his One Ring. Though it's currently unclear precisely when Middle-earth's new Dark Lord will make his iconic weapon, there are hints throughout this most recent installment that the moment will come sooner rather than later. Sauron learned a lot of essential lessons from Celebrimbor in Rings of Power Season 2, and the finale left him holding a couple of important artifacts that are sure to have something to do with his coming creation. At the end of Rings of Power Season 2, Sauron departed Eregion, having successfully deceived Celebrimbor into making the 16 Rings of Power that will fall under his rule. Of course, this is only the first step in his goal to heal Middle-earth. These rings will need to be distributed among the dwarves and men for the corruptive powers to begin to take effect. The 7 are already in the hands of Durin IV, and Sauron is sure to hand out the 9. Then, the villain's next move will be to make his One Ring. However, Tolkien never explained how this was done, so Rings of Power will have to get creative. Rings of Power hints that Morgoth's crown will connect to Sauron's ring. The Iron Crown may be reforged. The Crown of Morgoth in The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2 Episode 8. Rings of Power has brought a few intriguing artifacts into the mix, all of which Sauron has taken a particular interest in. Season 2 revealed that the new Dark Lord had taken Morgoth's Iron Crown for himself, reforging it to fit and demanding that Adar place it on his head. Of course, the father of orcs instead used this crown's power to murder Sauron. However, after repaying the favor, Sauron took the Iron Crown back from Adar at the end of Rings of Power Season 2, and this is one of the items he is seen holding as the episode comes to a close. In Tolkien canon, Morgoth's crown was reforged into a collar to keep the Vala prisoner in the void, so it definitely was never used as an ingredient for Sauron's One Ring. However, Rings of Power changing the fate of this artifact implies it will serve a different purpose in the coming episodes. Back in Season 1, Sauron, as Halbrand, suggested Celebrimbor make a crown, but their plan later changed to rings. Perhaps the Lord of the Rings villain's initial plan had always been to control Middle-earth with Morgoth's crown. Now, however, he may again reforge this artifact into the One Ring. Sauron keeping Feanor's hammer implies he will use it to make the One Ring. Sauron has the perfect tool to forge his ring. Sauron, Charlie Vickers, contemplating the hammer of Fëanor in The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2 Episode 8. The other artifact that Sauron holds at the end of Rings of Power Season 2 is Fëanor's hammer. Fëanor, who was depicted as a statue in Eregion's city circle, was the famed elvish smith credited with creating the 3 Silmarils. These were the most beautiful stones ever crafted and were the envy of even Morgoth, who stole them from Fëanor and thus caused centuries of war. The Silmarils were once fitted to the 3 spikes of Morgoth's Iron Crown, which makes the fact that Sauron stole Fëanor's hammer from Eregion all the more intriguing. Fëanor's hammer had been very special to Celebrimbor, who aspired to outdo his ancestor as he created the Rings of Power. Sauron convinced him to use the hammer himself to make the 9, and it's implied that this act imbued Celebrimbor's creations with an added touch of destiny. Sauron taking the hammer as a souvenir of his time with Celebrimbor is certainly telling of his conflicted relationship with Eregion's smith. However, since Morgoth himself coveted Fëanor's Silmarils, it's fitting that Sauron would desire to make his crowning achievement using the elf's legendary hammer. Sauron's blood trick is sure to be repeated with his final creation. Sauron learned that sacrifice is necessary. Sauron, Charlie Vickers, showing his dark blood in The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2 Episode 7. Rings of Power Season 2 appeared to provide another hint regarding the creation of Sauron's One Ring. While Celebrimbor made the 3 elven rings and the 7 dwarven rings using mithril, his forge had run out of the stuff before he could make the 9 for men. Sauron went to Khazad-dûm to get more, but the greed of King Durin III meant he left empty-handed. Taking Celebrimbor's lesson about the necessity for sacrifice to create, Sauron cut his hand and poured some of his black blood into a vial instead. Though Celebrimbor thought he was using refined mithril, it was actually the Dark Lord's own essence. Sauron's lesson about sacrifice will most certainly not end here. His most important creation yet is on the way, and, in Tolkien canon, Sauron pours his being directly into the One Ring. This is what will allow him to exercise control over the other rings of power, but it also means that he is tethered to the One Ring's existence. Sauron's blood being used to craft the One Ring adds another layer to Tolkien's story. Not only does it explain why the One Ring was so intimately connected to its maker, but Sauron's black blood being the common ingredient with the 9 would further reinforce his connection to the Ringwraiths. What else Sauron will need to make his One Ring? The final thing Sauron needs is a forge. There was never any indication in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings that Sauron used Morgoth's crown, Fëanor's hammer, or his own blood to make his One Ring. This would all be an invention of Rings of Power. However, there is one particular element to this weapon's creation that is a canon necessity. Sauron famously forges the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom, which is the only place that it can be destroyed in the Lord of the Rings. As it is, this venue was just officially freed up for the Dark Lord at the end of Rings of Power Season 2. Adar had taken ownership of Mordor at the end of Rings of Power Season 1, forcing Mount Doom to detonate and cover the land in shadow to protect his orc children. Since Sauron influences the orcs to kill Adar in the finale of Season 2, Mordor is no longer under another's control. Future episodes will surely see the Dark Lord establish himself in this dark kingdom and utilize the volcanic mountain as a forge. With the fires of Mount Doom, Morgotha's crown, Feanor's hammer, and his own dark essence, Sauron is all set in Rings of Power to make his One Ring.